Hi everyone! Time for the next chapter, and this chapter's called The Yeti Baby. To this day, I have no idea how Jodie managed to carry me all the way back to the big doors and into the school, but she did. As soon as Jodie laid me down on the corridor floor, I woke up and Jodie said, "You're safe. Don't scream. You fainted when you saw the Yeti." And it took her ages to say it because she was seriously out of breath. And that's when I remembered seeing the Yeti coming at us in the playground, and it had been terrifying. We both just lay there while Jodie caught her breath, and that's when my brain came on again properly, and I said, "Zach!" because I'd just realised that we'd lost Zach now too. And I was just thinking that of all the totally terrifying things we've had to deal with at this school, we had never lost 3 people at the same time before, and that this was serious. Then all of a sudden, I heard someone calling my name, and I looked at Jodie, and then we heard someone calling her name too. So we sat up, and we saw a small figure at the far end of the corridor, and that's when Jodie said, "Uh-oh, it's Mrs. Seath. She's found us." And I knew that we'd probably get a detention in her office for not going to class, because that is seriously against the school rules. And I also knew that if we were in a detention, we wouldn't be able to go back outside and save Maisie and Zach from the Yeti. So I said, "Run!" But Jodie just stared at me, and it was obvious that she wasn't expecting me to say that we should run away from the deputy head teacher, because her mouth was wide open. And then Mrs. Seath must have heard me, because she shouted, "Don't even think about it. You're in enough trouble as it is. I'll be calling your parents." And that's when we knew that there was nothing left to lose, and that Mrs. Seath was going to call our parents anyway, and that this was probably the most trouble we'd ever been in at school before, and that we were definitely going to get expelled this time. So I started to run all the way up to the 3rd floor, and Jodie ran after me. And once we got to the top, she said, "You do realise that we're going to get expelled for life, don't you?" And I said that I did. And then we did a quick pinky promise that we would never make our mums send us to the same school. That we would make our mums send us to the same school so that we wouldn't be on our own. Then Jodie said, "We're lucky she wears those high heels. She'll never catch us." But I knew that we still had to be quick because there might be other teachers looking for us too. So we dropped to the ground and commando crawled along the corridor so the teachers wouldn't see us through the glass windows in the classroom doors. And then we jumped up and looked out of the window at the playground. That's when Jodie gasped and pointed and said, "There!" And that's when I saw it. And even though I tried not to, I squealed a bit because there was a huge, hunched beast out there. I stood with my mouth wide open and watched as the Yeti moved really slowly through the snow. The Yeti was covered in brown and white hair, and it looked like it was carrying something. Jodie said, "I can't believe what I'm looking at. Can't believe this is real life." And I couldn't believe it either, because sometimes we're wrong about things, but it was obvious that this time we were absolutely right, because there was a great, big, hairy Yeti in the playground. Then Jodie said, "Why is it moving so slowly?" And she pressed her face against the glass so she could see better, and then she said, "Is that a baby Yeti?" And I looked carefully and noticed that whatever the Yeti was carrying was white and fluffy. And that's when Jodie said, "This is bad." And I thought she meant that it was bad that there were 2 Yetis instead of just one. But then she said, "I'm pretty sure a mother Yeti is even more dangerous than a normal Yeti." Then Jodie explained that in the wild, mummy bears and gorillas and llamas will do anything to protect their young and make sure that they get fed. But then all of a sudden, Jodie gasped and said, "Oh no, look!" And I looked and saw that the Yeti was even closer to the school now. And also that the baby Yeti definitely wasn't a baby Yeti, because baby Yetis don't wear red scarves. But Maisie does. Jodie started panicking, and that is not normal for Jodie, so I knew that I had to be strong and take charge. So I grabbed Jodie by the face and said, "We're going to get her back. Do you hear me?" But Jodie shook her head and said, "No, we're not. Did you see the way the Yeti was holding her? It was holding her like a baby. It thinks Maisie is its baby. She'll never give her up." And I realised that the Yeti must have thought Maisie was a baby Yeti because she was wearing the fur boots and fluffy white coat, and that baby Yetis must have hairy feet and fluffy white fur like Maisie's coat. Jodie leaned against the wall and sort of slumped down until she was sitting on the floor with her head in her hands. But I wasn't ready to give up, and there was no way I was going to let the Yeti take Maisie. So I grabbed Jodie and pulled her to her feet, but then all of a sudden the swing doors burst open. Who do you think it was? We saw Mrs. Seath standing there in her bare feet. I froze on the spot and stared at her because she was sweaty and out of breath, and her hair had gone a bit wild. And I knew that she must have lost her shoes on the way up the stairs, because it's quite a long way, and that the heels on her shoes had maybe even broken because of how many stairs there were. I had no idea what we were going to do, because we were in deep trouble for breaking the school rules, and Mrs. Seath was obviously raging about her shoes, and she didn't even know that Maisie had been captured by the Yeti. But then all of a sudden, Mrs. Akbar came running out of her classroom and gave Mrs. Seath a great big hug and said, "We've been saved!" And I whispered, "Run!" And we ran down the stairs faster than we have ever run before, and we both knew that we were obviously officially expelled. But Jodie said that we had bigger things to worry about because Zach and Gary were still lost out there, and also that she thought Mrs. Akbar had said, "We've been saved," because the army were on their way with a tank and a helicopter and a huge steel cage for trapping the Yeti before dropping it back on Mount Everest where it belonged. So I started putting my badminton racket shoes back on, but then Jodie kicked them away and said that we didn't have time, and that I wasn't understanding, and that we had to get Maisie before the army did, otherwise they would capture her too. And I gasped, because I realised that the army would think Maisie was the Yeti's baby, and that she would get captured in the steel cage and dropped on Mount Everest too. That's when Jodie pushed the big doors open, and loads of snow blew in, and Jodie had to actually hold on to the door so she didn't get blown over. And then she said, "We need to find Zach first. He's got the Yeti net. Are you ready for this, Izzy?" And I knew that she was asking me if I was ready to take on a Yeti. And I didn't think anyone was ever really ready to do that. But I knew that we didn't have a choice. So I put my hand out, and Jodie put her hand on top of mine, and we said, "Let's do this." And then I took a deep breath, and we ran out into the snow. Do you think they'll get Maisie back from the Yeti before she gets dropped on Mount Everest by the army? Or will they be captured by Mrs. Seath before they can save her? We'll have to find out next time. Have a nice weekend, everyone. Happy Friday. Bye.